Hey there, welcome. I wanted to speak about a similar topic in another video I made where there's no conclusion in spiritual practice or non-duality or realization, enlightenment. It's an internal process. It's an internal beingness. It's a beginningless beingness. But that, I want to talk about something else, which is there's no answers. And so there's no point in asking a question. And I'll try to say what I mean by this. I think the only questions we should ask, other than like colloquial questions between humans just living their daily lives, are questions that aren't seeking the limitless. Questions that aren't seeking like the ultimate truth, the root. There's a few reasons that I've realized why this is the case. But basically we only want to get answers that are practical, that work. And this takes it takes a certain frame of mind. There's many ways to do this frame of mind, but we need to not think of the practical answers as ultimate truths. Whether this is science, whether this is even just like some internal answers for like trauma or past experiences. We like go into a state, ask ourselves a question like, why do I do this? Why am I like this? And then maybe we realize, oh, my parents did it, or oh, this thing happened to me, or oh, there's this tendency in society, or oh, I've been craving this thing my whole life and I wasn't fully aware. That's why I act this way, or I think this way, or I feel this way. These are fine when we're not trying to seek like the real answer. Because they can help us practically. They can just help us have a good day, get along. Even scientific inquiry can help us have step-by-step accumulation of data and understandings, even though they're always like incomplete. Like we always find a smaller particle. We always find a new chemical reaction. We always discover a new way of having technology operate. It's just that's going to be the case eternally because it's literally infinite, so we can just keep discovering. It's never going to stop, and that's okay if we're okay with that. It requires like we're just realizing these are practical step-by-step truths, this inquiry about existence or about ourself. But if we really want like the root, the truth, we aren't going to get an answer. Any answer we acquire in our awareness, we can say it's a hallucination. We can just say it's a dream. We can just say it's from our imagination, or just like a story, like a parable, an analogy, a allegory. We could say it's temporarily true, We could say it was true at the moment maybe, but then life changes and then that's not the case anymore. We never can assert for absolute certainty that the answer we get when we ask things in spiritual contexts is going to be the ultimate truth. It's so likely that it's a story or just one way of looking at things. Whether it's a creation myth, whether it's like we're asking like, why do humans have desire? Why do humans suffer? It's most likely going to be one limited perception about that we can't prove is true. And this is why in spiritual practice, like earnest spiritual practice, there's no point in asking a question. This relates to there's no such thing as real seeking. We're not actually seeking because there's no limited thing we're trying to find. If we're honest with ourselves and we are saying like, no, I want a limited thing, I want these states of being, I want happiness, I want physical health, I want community, I want to, experience bliss, I want to mimic the yogis because that's a passion, it's a drive, it's an impulse of mine. I just want to do what they do. There's all sorts of limited desires that we can just accept and move along with, but we have to be humble and in the earnesty that we're not actually seeking the real truth. We're not actually trying to get the ultimate. We're not trying to get enlightenment. We're trying to get a specific thing. There's nothing wrong with getting specific things in this eternal universe. Like it's fine. It's part of the Leela, it's part of the play, it's part of the infinitying. So, but when we're honest about it and when we realize it and when we can own that, like just embrace that brings a lot of relief. It washes away a lot of confusion. And I think people will actually realize like they don't want enlightenment. They want the limited qualities they associate with enlightenment. They want the bliss, they want the happiness, they want the wisdom, they want the virtue, the effect on the world or others. They want the idea of it. Even if deep down we all actually want enlightenment because it's the truth of all existence, in our moment to moment, if we're asking questions, if we're seeking, if we're trying to get answers, we most likely want a limited thing, which is just the antithesis of the root source of all existence. It's not a limited thing, and it's never going to be. And it's so unlimited that it can maintain infinite limited things. It is the source of all limited thingness, limited experiences and experiencers, us, all of our experiences and feelings, and much, much more. And that holding, that permeating, beginningless, endless presence beyond comprehension, one of the best ways we can call, like yogis have termed it, is basically either emptiness, like it's nothing, it's so crazy and insane, and you just like you can't put a thingness on it. That's just not gonna be sufficient. Or it's love, and it's love because there's no wall, there's no barrier there's no bound on the vibratory quality of all of it together, and it holds everything all the time, and it never stops. It's a type of care that isn't human. It's a type of love that isn't human, but people experience it, and like one of the best words they can use for it is love. Or the all-powerful, the almighty, the boundless, these anti-words in a way, these words that denote something without measure, like emptiness, like measureless. But we're not going to get an answer. Even for our own psychological stuff. Like, I'm not saying don't. I'm not saying we can't get practical things. But I see what happens is that people ask questions. They seek. And myself included. And our mind tells us a story. Our mind gives us a perception, an imagination. It gives us an answer. We're craving an answer. It gives us an answer. It speaks to us in some form. But this, if we're hard on this, if we're really attached to this, we're just going to be circling in a limitation. And this can happen even if we ask a question during an ayahuasca ceremony, if we pray and ask God to give us an answer. The infinite might actually give us an answer, but it's not like the ultimate truth. It's a relative happening just because we're seeking limitation and not God. we're seeking contradiction at the end of the day. If we actually want God and we actually want limitation, like an illusion, like that which isn't God fully, it's God's permeates all limitation, but when we look at it as limited, forget that it's God. This tension is something we're manifesting. It's something we're creating, and it's in that very impulse of asking a question, of seeking and wanting a limited answer. And so spirituality is less about inquiry. It's less about reading and intellectuality and asking the guru a question like, where does it all come from? What's the origin? Like, this isn't the role of spirituality. This doesn't matter. And even in the role of like evolution and history and science, we're not going to get the answer. We don't know. It's like pics or it didn't happen. Basically, we don't have pics. We don't know. And we're never going to know. And that's honesty. And that's part of spirituality, is this embodied ethical unity of beingness, where even in just simple things like speaking about reality, speaking about what's going on, some might take the path of giving an answer to appease people and give them comfort, but the true guru knows if that person's going to latch onto it and cause their own suffering, and thus they will stay silent, or they'll say something that isn't going to give them an answer. Maybe they'll ask another question, or tell them to just love God, or just remain present, or there's many infinite things to say that aren't lies, that aren't limits. And you see a lot of teachers, they share origin myths, they share stories, and trying to like cut up reality for us to understand it. This is not the role of spirituality. That's the role of science. And we should stick with the path of science if we're just looking for limited practical truth, and keep evolving that to make it ever better. And it's not one thing, there's so many different fields of study in science and reality understanding, and it's always evolving, and it's always going to evolve. It's an endless thing. But that's the realm of like limited questionings. Spirituality isn't about question. The questions that are proposed are like, who am I? This thing that just turns in upon itself and realizes that it's just this. And then ideally chooses, habituates in staying within this instead of limited notions about this. Limited notions about this can happen, but it's ideal if we are aware that it is God and we're actually one with God, and not distracted by the limited notions. And so, not to say watch out for teachers that are giving answers to questions, but more like you don't need to ask them. And that's not really what you're going to get. You're not going to get answers, because it's not the type of thing that is about an answer. And we lose part of the essence when we're seeking answers. And this is actually, I do think it's a sign when you see traditions and people are perpetuating mostly like answers to metaphysical questions about reality, about Shiva, about the origins of the universe, or how things happen. No. They're not true. Unfortunately. No, it's actually fortunate that they're not true, because then we just don't have to play that game. And then that game's kind of boring. But no. We just don't, the craving of an answer, the impulse to ask a question, to try and encapsulate God, to try to encapsulate infinity. This is not true spirituality. It only is in the sense that they're innocent and earnest, and they're trying to find out things. The earnest, devoted seeker. But there's no answer you're going to get. And when I say this, I also want to share that it's not all, like, it's a Venn diagram, more like wanting an answer. So questions, and then wanting an answer, and then the path of seeking. It's like one of those, Venn diagrams where there's a lot of overlap, but there's not complete overlap. So there's ways of seeking that aren't about questions and answers, that are just about honing in on awareness. And discovery happens as the essence of God, not as a desire for limitation. And there's ways of questioning things that aren't about getting answers, but they're about unraveling something within us. And that's a delicate art, all three of those. And then, like I said, there's ways of getting answers as well that aren't about asking questions and not even about seeking. And that's also like a flow state thing where you didn't ask a question and you weren't seeking anything, but God gave you the answers. The infinite presented what you needed. And it's like the extremity of these diagrams from a simplified perspective is kind of more aligned with this sense of faith, contentment, and discipline. So I just wanted to say that because there's so many questions. Like almost in the entirety of it is illusion. It's limit, and that's not what spirituality is about. You can ask questions like, what happens when baking soda mixes with vinegar? Like, these are great questions, and to know the answers, that's great. But when it's about Paramatman, Parambrahman, the great perfection, about love, about compassion, about these things, questions aren't really the way. Beingness is the way. And that's not cut and dry, but it's like more aligned than asking questions and craving answers. And then only resting in contentment when we get an answer we like. That is a whole other relation to dissatisfaction that we're not here for. So thank you for watching. Om Sai Ram.